You're listening to episode 184 of the D6 podcast. This is the family ministry podcast that helps you connect the church and home.
I don't know anything more important in our society or in the kingdom of God than to help the church, help the family.
Discipleship is not an event, it's a way of life.
And one day it just hit me that discipleship at home was not about doing more. It was about inviting Christ into what we were already doing.
The goal of family ministry is not families sitting on the couch holding hands and singing Kumbaya. The ultimate goal is families that love God, love people, and make disciples of all peoples.
So that's why you're here. You're here to say 1 hour a week, as significant and as awesome as it is, we know that it's not enough and we want to be intentional with every hour.
You're listening to the D6 podcast. Here's your hosts, Ron Hunter and Jeremy Lee.
Ron?
Yes, Jeremy?
If we're listening to this in real time, if people are listening to this in real time, it's Veterans Day is coming up.
That's
in
right.
just a few days. And I want to say to you, Happy Veterans Day.
Well,
you are a veteran. I am not. You are.
Thanks, Jeremy. I often get that when I use my discount card at Lowe's. So
Thank you for your service. What is
that's
it?
right.
Do people say that?
They really do. And, you know, I kind of feel a little awkward at receiving that because I was in the military during the time in between the two Gulf Wars. And so I had just transferred from Tennessee down to Florida when my unit got activated back in Tennessee about 6 months later. And so I somewhat feel some guilt in there that I have not served at the level that other people have. So, I nod, I say thank you. I don't want to shrug it off, but there are people who have done tours of duty at a much greater, deeper level than I. And I'm very, very appreciative for those men and women who have done so.
As part of my gift to you for Veterans Day, I'm going to plug your book for veterans.
Oh,
well, it's not
yes.
yours.
Oh, that's not mine. I didn't write it.
Dr. Edward Moody wrote it.
Correct, yes.
First Aid for Veterans.
Yeah.
And, I hope people know the First Aid series you guys are doing. It. What I always like to say is ministers should not act like counselors. They should respect the work of counselors. We can give common sense wisdom based on Scripture, but there are places where we should refer to others who have done the work and training. Counseling is definitely one of those. And you guys have a series of books called the First Aid series that basically gives us that reference point. And there's one for veterans.
That's right. And the series of books all started from a book that Dr. Moody wrote for the person who leads small groups or life groups or Sunday school classes, as well as pastors and maybe leaders within the church. They often get people coming to them with problems, whether or not it's addiction or anxiety, depression, my child, marriage issues, sexual issues, whatever it is. And these are common items. And that first aid book was there to help, not be the counselor, because it had a lot of resources in there for how to acknowledge. But the first aid booklets were designed so that when you as a teacher or a leader had somebody approach you, not only did you have the knowledge of what's in the first aid book, but you could take a booklet on that topic and hand to them and say, this is for you. Why don't you read that? And we can talk through that a little bit more. And it really is a counselor who's helping in any one of those. I think there's 12 or 13 different categories. And Veterans Day, Veterans booklet is Veterans Day reminds us not only of the sacrifice that veterans have made, but what they carry with them emotionally and mentally for what they cannot unsee and unfeel that they have seen and they have felt in various situations and battlefields and predicaments, so to speak.
A quick side on this. I get to be a part of a team on, I don't think I've ever told you this, a project called Warrior Rounds that it's working with veterans.
Awesome.
And I got to interview recently 6 veterans. Every one of them at some point in the interview said they at some point had a gun in their mouth and considered suicide. Everyone. And then at the end, the 7th interview was the children, little children, and like middle school, older, elementary, of a Gold Star family.
Yeah.
Gold Star family means that their parent died at some level, and this is actually because they died of suicide. The father committed suicide. And I told that to those kids. I said, everybody I've interviewed today has considered suicide. Could you just talk for a
Right.
second to, and their sweet words. They're
Wow.
they're
Yeah,
innocent,
yeah.
sweet words of please don't. Know that there's people who love you. Please don't if you're considering it.
Yeah,
It was beautiful.
yeah.
But this is the kind of work we have the opportunity to do in the church
That's
with
right.
veterans.
That's
and
right.
this resource can help with that.
We tend to look at our veterans as absolute strength in so many ways, and they are, but there are times that the military teaches you to keep that stern face regardless of emotion. You're not allowed to smile in uniform. There are various items that whenever you're there, you're not allowed to do. And that persona can carry through into life to where it's almost like you have on a mask hiding the very emotions that you're feeling. And so, if you have veterans in your church, chances of you approaching them and asking them, they'll shrug it off. They may deny it. Some may go, yes, if you get one-on-one like you did with your interviews. My recommendation is to have a handful of these booklets and lay them out and let them pick them up to where nobody sees them pick them up. That would be my recommendation.
So, last thing on this, a lot of us might be serving in churches and not even realize a military base is near us. So, something transferable would be to Google and see, is there a military base near me? Because that is a very focused opportunity to reach folks.
That's right.
And to grow what you're doing at your church, too.
Yeah.
So, incredible opportunity. Okay, but this isn't a veteran-themed podcast. We just kind of rolled into it.
Yeah, this is the time of the year. So if you want that, you can go to d6family.com, check out all the different booklet titles. Just put in the search first aid, and all of those resources will pop up for you.
Our guest today is Tony Myles. Tony is a friend of mine. He's written a really cool devotional book with his son, with a really interesting and unique perspective. I think you guys will enjoy that, and we'll have that in just a moment. But we have not taken time yet, Ron, and I want to have this time with you to kind of recap our D6 conference from 2019. And then I want to let you, if you don't mind, tell us what the theme is for 2020 and give us something for those of us who are wanting to come back, kind of give us some thoughts on that.
Absolutely. If you go to our website, d6conference.com, or you go to D6 Family, you'll click on the conference link, and you can see a highlight video that our media team has put together about the 2019 conference, and it was phenomenal. Jeremy, I will tell you, you were there.
Yeah, it was amazing.
People have asked me, how was it? And this has been my answer. I think it might very well have been my favorite D6 conference of all of them.
Wow.
With
Big words.
with the caveat, and it's hard for me to rank it that way, with the caveat that launching the very first one was special because you're launching something new.
Sure.
And then the third one was kind of special because of some things that happened there that was just unique. But taking away the emotion of 1 and 3, this absolutely, in all the different measures, and here's the measure I would give it: the excitement in the hallway by the attendees, the interaction we saw between them and the exhibitors, the main stage speaker lineup, just tremendous feedback from the attendees, the breakout speakers. We had more breakout speakers this year than any previous speaker, any previous year. And I don't know, the feedback was incredible. Were there places we can improve? Yes, always. But it was truly, truly good. So what was your favorite parts? I know you were in that podcast recording studio the whole time, but you've got a unique perspective there. What'd you see?
I'll tell you, the perspective I have is of the breakout speakers and the main stage speakers, because I talked to all of them. There were more than ever, and I just want to tell our podcast listeners, you have a great the interviews that are coming up that David Jones and I were both able to do this year. Just amazing. You guys are going to love what we have for you this year, and from that perspective. So yes, what I can speak to is just the quality of the people who were leading it. Yes, I would rank this as high as any of the ones I've been a part of. And then I can talk about the location. The hotel was cool.
Hotel was
being in Orlando was awesome.
That's right. Did you ever make it down to the pantry?
I did.
I mean,
of course,
that's my
it
favorite
involves
place.
food.
Yes, exactly. That was my favorite place in the hotel, mainly because I was getting back to my room at 10:30 or 11 at night. That was the only place to be, go grab something to eat at that late. But
and for those of you that are cheap, it was a way to kind of get some food on the cheap, and I dug that.
Oh, no, and they had the Smucker's peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. Did you
Yes.
see those?
Yes. I didn't see
Okay.
them. I consumed them.
There we go.
All right. So,
Now
hey, we're having too much fun. You need to
we
tell us
are.
about next year.
Yes, next year, the theme, let's just go there and then we'll jump into the interview. But the theme for next year is As You Go. When we think about the term as you go, it exudes Deuteronomy 6. You know, our people are so incredibly busy. Moms, dads, you know, if we ask them, hey, can you just put one more thing into your schedule? They're like, don't ask me to do that. And the beauty of Deuteronomy 6 and the principles of family ministry are that every day provides teachable opportunities between parents and kids, between spouses, between the kids, between grandparents. And as we do life, that's what it means. As we go, you know, Deuteronomy 6, when we get up in the morning, when we sit down to eat together, we head off to school or work, when we come back at night. In other words, as we do life, as we go about life, that's what that means. And so all of our speakers are going to come at it from that angle, whether or not it's marriage, whether or not it's student ministry, as you go.
And like we say every year, the best way to bring a group to the D6 conference is to register them early, take advantage of the early bird discounts
That's
that you
right.
guys offer, and that allows you to bring more people. And so as you're dreaming and thinking, consider that D6conference.com. Now, family ministry has got to be cool. One of the things I love about it, it's got to become really neat when families are creating the resources. And so we're talking
Correct.
today about
Correct.
a resource that Tony and his son wrote
Yes.
together. I think you'll enjoy this interview. After the break, we'll come back with Tony Myles, and he'll be talking to us about the resource that he got to create with his son. Hey, everybody. Our guest today is Tony Myles. He's the author of If, What If? I like that. And it's it's a book that he wrote with his son, Daniel Myles. Now, to tell you a little bit about Tony, he's been a lead pastor. I think he's currently a youth minister. He's been volunteer. He's kind of seen ministry from all different perspectives, but he's also been a speaker at national conferences. He was the featured faith commentator on WKYC NBC, so TV guy. He was a newspaper columnist in the Cleveland suburbs where 63,000 people per week read his column. He currently lives in Minnesota. He's currently speaking at a camp, and he told me he ate a box of Raisinets to get energy for our interview. So please, everybody across the internet, welcome our guest, Tony Myles. Thanks for being with us, sir.
I am so grateful to be here. Thanks for mentioning the Raisinets too. I wasn't sure if that was going to make the cut.
Oh,
or not,
totally.
So.
I mean,
Yeah.
I have to get this interview in quick before the sugar rush fails you,
That's,
so we can take advantage of the energy.
yeah, that's it. That's it. As I was saying, it's one of those candies that either people are all in on or they think is old people's candy. So
Absolutely.
I'm trying to live the dream. And Raisinets, dark chocolate. If you want to send me a Raisinets for listening, you can send me as many boxes as you want for free.
That's how you can get to the heart of Tony Myles. We figured it out within the first few minutes of the interview. I love it. So, listen, you sent me this book to review. I really enjoyed the whole concept because, and that's kind of what I want to talk about today, because the subtitle of this book is Quirky Questions and Daily Devotions to Feed Your Family and Your Faith. I really like the quirky questions piece of this because I think as parents that are trying to lead their kids spiritually, one of the hardest things to do is to start the faith-based conversation. And we do know that faith-based conversations at home are one of the biggest indicators of actual spiritual development in families. So we want those conversations to happen. It's just sometimes not easy to bring up. So this book is meant to help you start those conversations, right?
Yeah. And so actually what's really cool about it is, I'm a big believer that every moment we're in is a spiritual moment. And I know that for a lot of people, they think that there's this spiritual component of their life and then everything else is natural or not that. And so we were just listening to our son, who at the time was 10, my son Daniel, and we'd be at dinner, and he would raise these questions that were really quirky, and hence the kind of the quirky questions. And they would take us all over the map, and in a really good way. And then he would just naturally follow up. So kind of he'd say, "Hey, if this," and we'd answer the question, and he'd say, "Okay, well, what if?" Kind of to interact with us. And so I don't know. After like a week or two, my wife and I were just like, "He is just in the zone on this," and we started writing those questions down, thinking maybe this could be something. Like we could put these questions out there, whether it's on the internet or something else. And then, long story short, I thought maybe this could be a book. And so as we shopped it around and just said, "Is this something that book publishers would be interested in?" One of them said, "Yeah, and would you be willing to write a daily devotion to go along with it?" So we followed through on that, and then as we prayed about it on our end, I said, "You know what? I think we need to go further. We need to teach families the entire Bible day by day, kind of the larger story of the Bible." And so it really became this amazing overlap of my son and I just spending time working on this together and developing what it became to be.
Yeah, and I told you off air before we started. I think the first bit of credibility that I got from this book was the fact that you and your son, anytime a parent and a child are willing to go on public record together that they have an actual relationship, I think you're winning right there.
Mm.
So, what was it like to work with your son, and how has it been to put about a book together?
He's my son is really cool in how he sees the world, but in many ways, it's kind of like a butterfly. Like he'll float over here and say something, and he'll float over here and say something, and it's majestic and beautiful. But you're trying to just catch him sometimes, and he has a unique personality compared to some of my other kids, my other two kids. And so, spending time with him on this, we just had to figure out what's going to be the best system for he and I to work on it. So I put an app on his tablet, and he would just dump the questions, and then I would look for ways to try to match those questions up to the devotions that I was working on. And so that was kind of that piece of it. But then every once in a while, he'd say, "Hey, Dad, I have a devotion I want to write. Can I do this one?" I said, "Yeah, absolutely." And so I would help him kind of craft it, and it would pour out of him. And there's probably a half dozen or so that he wrote specifically in the book. We worked on kind of whiteboarding out the larger theme of the book and how can we make the Bible memorable, because there is this core message to it. So it was amazing. We'd be on the way to the community center to go exercise, and on the way there, we're just writing questions and jamming it out on the drive there. It was great.
Nice. So let's get into it. Let's hear some of the quirky questions. Give me a few of your favorites.
I'm just opening up the book here randomly, but like, if you could call God on the phone, how often would you call him?
That's fun.
And what if he only answered the phone when you were in trouble? So you got that going on. And then, you flip over and he's got this: if a tiny marching band followed you through the house playing the same song all day, what song would you want them to play? And what if instead a full-size marching band circled your house? So, like, this is where we're at. We're all over the map. This is my son's brain. If you had a robot who looked like and acted like anyone you chose, who would you choose? And what if the robot wasn't completely loyal to you? So, we're going all over the place on that. And then that sets up a devotion. It sets up something that kind of relates to that particular topic.
Well, I'm gonna need the connection on those. So the examples you gave me help me understand the devotional thought, because I need to track it back.
Yeah. So I'll just pick one here. So this one is, if you can go into an arcade that had all the games in the world, what game would you most want to play? And then the second question is, what if you had to donate blood to the Red Cross first before you played that game? So from there, this is right in the middle of Jonah's part of the story, where we're realizing that some people in our life are known for certain things, and maybe you want to go do your own thing, but you have to first realize that there's a sacrifice involved, that God calls you to instead be with him instead of resisting him. And so a lot of times in life, we want to live a me-centered life. But in this particular devotional, I wrote, the moment we think someone doesn't deserve God's forgiveness is the moment we lose touch with his forgiveness. We might try to ignore or run from opportunities, but the Lord will keep tapping on your heart about it, not to annoy you, but so that you can claim the joy of releasing others into their intended identity in Christ. And then from there, we just talk about application. And so, a lot of times it's literally an icebreaker question that is meant to just disarm everyone and get everybody laughing. But every time we could, we really tried to leverage the question toward the conversation.
Oh, man, I love that. So, as we move forward with this, how do you see churches and ministries using a resource like this? Because I'm gonna just be straight with you, that is pretty quirky. So, how would you? But I could totally see definitely a certain kind of kid just like eating this up.
Yeah. I mean, the thing for me that really we wanted to work hard on is I've done a lot of devotions with my families over the years where I go, well, that was great, but what do we do with it? And so we really prayed for a long time about how can we make this a memorable experience. So just as an example, in our home, we're trying to be super intentional. We were trying to, at the time we were writing this, really just keep growing ourselves. But then we were reaching out to a family next door to us who had just started coming to church. And every time we wrote something, we thought, what would their family really benefit by? What did they need to hear? Because I didn't grow up in a Christian home, my wife did. And so for me, I always felt like I was catching up to what the Bible is, the story it teaches. And so for about 3 weeks, we actually sat down and we whiteboarded out, this struggle. It was the tension of what is the larger story of the scripture, and can we share it in such a way where as we take people through the devotions, it's not a random place here and a random place there. So we came up with this acronym, and the acronym is that there is hope. And so the acronym spells out kind of chronologically the story of the scriptures. So T represents the Trinity, that before there was anything, there was a community of someone. And as we kind of hang out there and we go, okay, before we even open up the pages of Genesis 1:1, what do we know? We know the fact that God exists. And so H becomes the heritage. And this is what we see at creation. God passes down a heritage to us. So we have Trinity, heritage. Then the enemy comes along. That's the letter E. And the enemy tempts us. And because we listened to God's enemy, we became an enemy to him, an enemy against each other, and an enemy to ourselves. But God doesn't stop there. He creates a revolution. That's the letter R, through the covenants. And he keeps coming after us and saying, I'm going to be for you. I will be your God. You will be my people. I've got this plan for you. But then E again, we now have ego. Man's ego begins to become this massive issue where we want to set up kingdoms for ourselves and we want things to be our way. So he sends prophets in to remind us of our identity. That's the letter I. And for a large season, that's kind of the story. And then there's this pause. And we actually threw it in, even though it's not in the scriptures directly, the intertestamental period. So that's the letter S. And it's just a shh. So we have there is. And then we get to H, which is Jesus, the hero who comes. That's H. O is the opportunity he gives us to choose new things. P is the purpose he gives us as the church to live out our identity communally. And E is eternity. So the message of the scripture is that there is hope. And every chapter we end on this kind of acronym of here's a little takeaway or a tweetable if you got something out of us and you want to put it on social media and share with other people, that there is hope in whatever chapter it is connected to a larger story.
My goodness, it feels like you're putting a whole curriculum in a book. I mean, there's a lot of power packed into that.
Well, it took 3 weeks of frustration staring at a whiteboard to realize it. And when, I remember Daniel was outside, he was in the driveway, and I was looking at him, I'm like, I think I got it. And I ran out and I high-fived him. And I'm like, this is it. This is what we've been talking about. And yeah, because that's it. I mean, that's the core message. Wherever you're at in life, there is hope. And if you feel like you're on the front end of this, there is hope. And if you feel you're further in and you're lost and you're trying to figure out what chapter you're in, there is hope. So our hope is that by the end of a year of reading this, and we have like a 6 day on, 1 day off, format to the book, you will end up going, wow, I didn't realize how much God was intentional here to set that next thing up, And I just didn't have that in my early years of faith. I came to faith as a junior in high school. My parents were divorced. They weren't going to be much help. A lot of my peers that already knew about the Lord, they just assumed that I knew things they knew. And so for me, this is sort of a book that I wish somebody would have handed me as a teenager. And what's been cool is I'm hearing not only families are reading it, but I'm hearing adults are reading it, and they're feeling like they can actually sit down with their kids after they've read a chapter and say, hey, I want to do something with you based on what I've read. So it's kind of a win for everybody.
So one of the things I like about this is it's because this is D6 based off Deuteronomy 6, which is got this whole spirit in it of discipleship as you go, right? As you walk along the road, as you lie down, and so forth and so on. And I think this book is kind of written in that spirit, correct? It was kind of meant to be digested on road trips and, just as you're kind of going through life a little bit at a time.
Yeah, we've just kind of come up with this little informal rule in our family that we just want to read it together. So if for some reason there's a meal that we can't be at together, we kind of wait. And so I'd say 5 days out of the week, we as a family are practicing it ourselves, but it's exactly in the situations you described. It could be around our dinner table. We've got it with me as I'm at camp. We're going through it ourselves and just kind of processing it. So it's the kind of thing you can do in 10 minutes. And I just find that Deuteronomy 6 challenge is so organic, but yet we need equipping to be equippers. And I think that a lot of families out there, they're trying to be good parents. They're trying to be good kids. They're trying to be in this journey with each other, but schedule changes and multiple jobs being what they are, it just feels like we need to have an anchor somewhere. And so whether this is a beginning of the day or an end of the night kind of deal, it can really cause there to be a peace for 10 minutes in your home that you're coming around the scriptures and you're trying to figure out who are we as a family going to be.
I think this sounds like just a really cool resource for us to kind of jump in and check out. So if you're a minister listening to this, I hope this has kind of been a cool introduction and maybe an inspiration to use questions to connect to the greater overall story of the gospel. So if they want to get a hold of this, a copy of this, where would be the best way for them to go find it?
It's all the usual places. You can get it on Amazon or through Lifeway directly. Barnes & Noble will order it for you pretty much anywhere. And what's really cool is I've actually found at a recent ministers conference, it actually sold out. A lot of pastors looked at it and just said, man, like this is exactly stuff that I either need to teach from. Because let's face it, even in student ministry, a lot of student pastors are volunteer and they're like, I would love to take our students through the Bible, but I don't know how. And you can actually use this as a springboard for your lessons and just kind of go through it. And, what you don't teach, you can create as follow-up for them to read throughout the week. So I am happy however it gets used, but I just love the fact that there's so many resources that can be developed through this and so many outlets for it to be used.
So whether you're looking for small group material, if you're looking for devotional material, or just something interesting, you might want to check this out. Again, the book is called What If, and it's by Tony Myles with his son, Daniel Myles. Hey, Tony, thanks for spending some time with us. I appreciate it.
Yeah, just remember, there is hope.
I love it. See you later.
I think their questions were clever, Jeremy. Mm-hmm. That is, who would have thought you could have written a book around that topic? They are creative.
I love that he was willing to just say out loud, my kid's a little quirky. I'm a little quirky, and our book is quirky.
That's right.
And I just think, not every resource fits every person. We've all just got these folks that just kind of are fabulously quirky, and this seems like a cool resource for them. So thank you, Tony, for being a part of the podcast. Now, next week, we have an incredible interview from our co-host, David Jones. He will be bringing us an interview from Kaylin Moore, who went from abject poverty in Compton, California, to becoming a Rhodes Scholar. That is straight out of Compton for sure.
Yes,
so we'll enjoy that next week. Thank you guys for being a part of the D6 podcast. We love and appreciate. Again, as I like to say, if you've made it to this point of the podcast, you have given us your time and attention, and we consider it a true gift, and we thank you for it. Hey, if you don't mind, please leave us a review on iTunes, and always we'd love to talk to you. We're on Twitter at D6Leader, and we would love to stay in touch with you. Hope you have a great week of ministry.
You've been listening to the D6 Podcast. You can learn more about D6 at d6family.com.